If you enjoy the process of discovering historical mysteries and the profound depths of Egyptian mysticism, the exploration of death and the afterlife, funerary art in general, this book will really be for you. So stay tuned. Welcome to Biblioccultus, where I review books that I find interesting in the topics of religion, philosophy, history, and fiction. Please remember to subscribe to the channel, click the bell for notifications, like the video, share the video, and comment on the video. I will really appreciate you doing all these things to increase the visibility of the channel and help it expand and grow. In this episode, I am going over The Tomb of Tutankhamun by Howard Carter. And this book is a classic work. It's a profoundly impactful work, historically speaking. And when it first came out in the 1920s, it really influenced the view of archaeology by the general population. It actually engendered the romantic, exotic perspective involved in the discovery of mysteries, and it actually is the origin of the cultural phenomena that Indiana Jones later on reflects. And this is why that movie is set up in the same general era, because it was during really this time when this became actually fashionable. You would have people from all over the world, especially the celebrities of the time and the aristocrats of the time, taking time out of their schedule to go to Egypt and actually go into these caves and hear the archaeologists explain what they've discovered, etc. So it was very fashionable and very exciting at the time. And this book is really a reflection of that moment in time. And just for that reason, it makes it very special. Also, a lot of the myths about the curse of the pharaohs and countless people succumbing to some kind of mysterious set of circumstances that leads all to their untimely deaths also has a lot to do with this event in history that is being documented in the book. Now, this edition that I have here is from the Folio Society from 2021. Now, this edition is spectacular because it has two books. One would be the actual text by Howard Carter, including a lot of wonderful photographs taken during the process of the archaeological discovery, plus a second book with very high quality pictures of the items themselves, placed already in a museum setting. And just that smaller book is absolutely incredible, and it makes this edition special. So I always say get any edition you want, and obviously you can find old editions of this book, but if you can get this particular edition, you would really benefit from it just because of that secondary book. Now, one thing pointed out by Carter is the backdrop of Tutankhamun's rule, and the fact that he was the son of Akhenaten. At the time when he wrote the book, it was assumed or speculated that he was the son of Akhenaten, but it was not very well determined. But as of today, there have been plenty of genetic studies, and it has been fairly well established that he was the son of Akhenaten, a religious reformer. I will put some more information in the show notes, but he did an absolute revolution, and some people call him the first recorded instance of monotheism. Although, as I've said before, the term monotheism is a pretty brand new term, and it doesn't really apply to any religious system at all until the term started being applied as a way of categorizing religions. But the truth is that no ancient Christian called themselves monotheist, no ancient Hebrew called himself monotheist, and Akhenaten himself didn't, even though there's a lot of academic studies pointing out that he would be the first to really fall into that category in some way. Now, for Carter, what he found interesting in The Tomb of Tutankhamun is that it was fairly personal, that the items reflected a personal dynamic that was being communicated in the tomb instead of a highly religious one. Now, again, this is in comparison to other tombs that he had discovered and studied, which were highly religious in every aspect. So all he's saying is that in this particular tomb, there were a lot more personal items, and it was a lot more intimate when it comes to a lot of the articles found. Now, Carter, obviously in his book, goes through the meticulous process of digging through the site, categorizing each piece, preservation, the techniques of preservation, and the arduous but exciting dynamics involved in this, and a very serious intent on defending the integrity of the tomb itself. And just that aspect of the work is important. A lot of people may skip over it somehow or not pay a lot of attention to it, but I would argue that this is a very important part of the book because you will learn the way that the original archaeologists at the time, without a lot of the modern science, were still making sure to preserve things and keep them as close as to the original as possible. Now, I want to quote a part of the book that I think will really present an important aspect of the discovery and the meaning of linking oneself to the past. And this is him talking about the religious dynamic involved in these tombs. The religious aspects of most races become modified by time, circumstance, and education. In some cases, their feeling towards death and its mysteries is refined and spiritualized. With the growth of culture, love, pity, sorrow, affection find tenderer modes of utterance and expression. Of this we have evidence in Greek epitaphs and Latin tomb inscriptions. But if the more delicate shades of sorrow be less obviously manifested by the ancient Egyptians, it is rather because the gentler human moods seem overwhelmed under the weight of their elaborate burial practices, that these emotions are absent. Belief in the continuity of the human soul is the idea whence these practices were evolved. To strengthen this conviction and impress it on the world, no sacrifice was deemed too great. The afterlife seems in their eyes to have been more important than their worldly existence, and the most careless student of their customs may wonder at the lavish generosity with which this ancient people launched their dead on their last mysterious journey. So Carter wanted to impress on the reader that the elaborate nature of the burial system of the Egyptians was meant to impress the meaning and the importance of the afterlife, and that this was actually even more important than anything else. It was a very hyper-focused religious culture, and I would argue that there's a lot from that which we can relate to if we are in the traditional religious mood. If you are a traditional Orthodox Christian, for example, or if you are a Muslim, or if you are a traditional Buddhist, just to give a few examples, you can relate to this point of view. That journey is such an important part of your life that it is integrated to your life, and therefore most of your decisions in this life are predicated on that important journey. And to the Egyptians, they manifested this artistically and culturally through the burial rituals and practices. As part of that culture, you have the Book of the Dead that was painted all over the tomb scene in the Great Hall, inside the burial chamber. And for those who don't know, the Book of the Dead is the religious text in which you have a variety of rituals and different prayers to help the dead navigate the very complicated world of the afterlife. The Egyptian religion was a stellar religion, meaning its focus was highly evolved in the realm of the stars and how the stars influence human beings, and much more than that, the vast canopy of the universe at night. A nighttime religion, but not necessarily in the occultic sense, but more in the feel, in the belief that nighttime was highly dangerous because it involved a maze of dark corridors that needed a variety of tools to help the dead navigate that the daytime and the nighttime were also perceived and lived by the dead. And therefore, in that nighttime period, the dead had a very arduous and dangerous journey to go through. So that is an integration of the stellar universe into the daily human life experience. So there's a sense of integration and separation that is, to me, very fascinating. Carter also expresses solemnity, the emotional charge of seeing Tutankhamun's golden casket after 3,000 years of being fully isolated. The Egyptians basically created death capsules, and through these death capsules, they were able to create a time machine of sorts. And Howard Carter was very, very aware of this. So that these burial chambers really are a very powerful time-bending experience, and it is profoundly presented in that way by the author. Aside from the complex tapestry of religious sects and shifts in time, because the religion morphed and changed and the focus of different cults were highlighted depending on the period, Carter does reflect and come to the conclusion that the most stable and consistently presented cult was the cult of Osiris. That no matter which burial site he visited in time and space, it was the cult of Osiris that stood out the most, and usually the coffin itself was shaped to represent Osiris and the myth of Osiris, which is a salvific myth, the death and resurrection and then the judgment of the dead by Osiris in the afterlife, granting said afterlife to all people, not only to the elite, thus giving Osiris a very Christological feel. And I'm saying that very lightly. I am not one of those that likes taking ancient religions and morphing them into modern religions and creating a genetic fallacy of sorts. I am simply stating that there is a clear, analogous connection, and I just leave it at that, because as a person living in time, it's difficult for me to not see similarities. But my point of reference is my own time, and in my own time, Christianity had a huge impact in my life and in the life of my ancestors. And therefore, when I look at the myth of Osiris, it's very difficult not to see something of a connection that I can relate to, at least. Making another connection there, as part of that cult of Osiris, they had a particular belief in wearing a jed, which is an amulet, to guarantee entry into the afterlife of bliss. And of course, the first thing that came to mind was the scapular, which is a Catholic tradition that is also worn around the neck to protect and guarantee, with some conditions of course, an easy or guaranteed entry into the heavenly realm after judgment. So I also found that connection to be quite fascinating. And like I said, to finalize here, this edition with that separate book really enhances the experience. So as you go through the text, the book will actually go into detail about each piece. And as you read the book, as it references each discovery, you can go into that book and open it up and look at the piece that he is referencing, allowing you to really enjoy the experience and also feel that connection to the past. I've always loved the Egyptian mythos on death because I find it to be profound. The truth is that a mystical system that ignores death or in some way tries to bypass it or ignore it or dismiss it as irrelevant is really a religion of death. In other words, the perception of death as being active within our life is actually an extension of life, a prolongation of life, a viewpoint that life is eternal. It is not impermanent. It is not limited. Whereas a culture that teaches that death should be ignored, or that nothing happens after death, or that death is irrelevant, and that it's morose or dark to focus on death, are actually a culture of death, because they're basically murdering your spirit or the very notion of the soul. So ironically, these cultures that obsess so much on death are actually life affirming in most cases. So I hope you enjoyed the review. Like I said, find any edition that you can, but if you can get this one, you will really enjoy it, or an edition similar to this one. So please remember to subscribe to the channel, click the bell for notifications, like the video, share the video, and comment on the video. I really appreciate your support. Thank you for being with me. See you next time.